Good evening. My name is Ramon Rios, and this is my presentation on the invisible glow of violence, also known as nuclear colonialism. I'll begin this with a short story on how the idea came to me. I was on my way to an appointment I had made at the doctor's office in Los Alamos. As I approached the infamous town, I passed by a sign that read, "Los Alamos, where discoveries are made!" Exclamation point. What struck me was the way that this proud reflection of the town's past is plainly clear, evident even by its punctuation. I had just hurt my shoulder riding my 4-stroke bike up in the hills. I was unsure if it was broken, sprained, or dislocated. My name was called to the back room, and I was given a lead apron. I'm sure most of you know where this is headed. Loud whirs and buzzing began to fill the room. Almost like magic, this special camera that he lowered down from the ceiling could now see my bones. How amazing and a wonderful healing experience this was, even though X-rays X-ray scans are so routine now. They told me I was fine and I had no fractures, and this was very good news to hear for me. Yet I couldn't help but notice on my way out of the town, there was this big museum of nuclear science and history. Feeling good about myself, I pulled over to check it out. There was a full-size mock-up of the Fat Man and Little Boy nuclear warheads at the front door. I had no choice after leaving the museum with lingering thoughts, and I pondered on the healing use, but also its terrible misuse, nuclear energy, and its invisible violent actions towards us. What I've learned this semester is that violence is not always, but often a physical interaction of some sort. But what happens when the cells of our bodies break down and are assaulted with no clear assailant to blame? What is the difference between violent action and force? The invisible danger we call radiation violates this contract that we have become familiar with. Lewis R. Gordon explains in his journal this, quote, "Force is the impact on one object of another, with at times the result of pain and suffering. Violence, however, requires a system of norms through which something wrong or undeserved or unjust happens." Delving into the United States history books reveals some pretty unjust crimes against humanity. One such as the Bikini Atoll bomb test sites were devastated by the US and to this day still remains uninhabitable. The nearby islanders and indigenous folk had no idea what was killing them. It was like some unseen mutated slayer. Or as suggested by Dr.Beshara, I also looked into the first of these ever tests that took place here in our own backyard. On July 16th, 1945, the first atomic bomb test, codenamed Trinity, took place in the morning outside Socorro, New Mexico. The ground zero was eventually named a historical landmark, but the nuclear side effects that remained were no joke. To this day, it's immeasurable new illnesses as well as new man-made elements that have been released into nature as a result of these explosions, not to mention the ever-lingering presence of mutually assured destruction. Johann Gattung writes, "It is useful to distinguish further between biological violence, which reduces somatic capability below what is potentially possible, and physical violence, such as which increases the constraint on human movements, as when a person is imprisoned or put in chains, but also when access to transportation is very unevenly distributed, keeping large segments of a population at the same place with a monopoly of the selected few with control." But the distinction is less important than the basic distinction between violence that works on the body and violence that works on the soul. End quote. Nuking those islands is something that remains hidden from mainstream consciousness. I find the nuance and moral dilemma of said subject to be hard to describe with my own words, but here Walter Benjamin proposes his own thoughts. The misunderstanding in natural law by which a distinction is drawn between violence used for just ends and violence used for unjust ends must be empathetically rejected. Our shared history has shown that if we as a society repeat an action enough, that it becomes more and more ordinary until the point that it becomes discounted altogether as normal. When we consider morality as end defining evil, this can take even a more serious tone. The scientists of Los Alamos National Labs created a new age when they figured out how to split atoms. Frantz Fanon has said, quote, violence, after all, is by definition a special kind of harm, one that involves the degradation of human beings. What is more corrosive to human beings than radiation? If you lay out in the sun's ultraviolet radiation for too long, your skin burns to a crisp. Eventually, we figured out how to manufacture our own suns, if even for just fractions of a second. What we do with our minds is find ways to create, discover, such as the motto for Los Alamos would have you believe. The violence that is unsung and invisible surely follows humankind, like a paradox waiting to alter our reality. One side wishes to aid in a positive fashion, while the other always looks to tear us apart. Thank you for listening.